Are we in it? Like, we're in it, right?
Oh, okay. Well, sweet. Is that my hero camera over there? There's one over here. All right. Yeah. Welcome to FrameOne. I'm Drysen. Today I'm sitting down with Jay Allen of Secret Powers. I am really excited about this. I'm going to dub you the meme lord, one of the real OGs.
That's a high calling.
It is, but I think it's fitting. You do a couple things. First off, you own Secret Powers in Texas.
I do.
What do you guys specialize in for your core business?
So we are a creative production studio. Our niche is video game marketing. So we make videos for video game marketing, trailers, trade show videos.
Perfect. And then to throw it back to the good old days, so to speak, your first company, Slack Circus, had a little call to fame. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think you're talking about Fabulous Secret Powers.
I am talking about Fabulous Secret Powers.
First, I'll put it back to you. What do you remember about this video, or what do you know about it?
You know, it's not fair because I watched it again like last night, so quite a bit.
Research.
Quite a bit.
You got to research.
I'm just saying. So, was that so? You made like the famous He-Man song? I'm not gonna do the face. I'm not gonna do the voice. I almost did.
Yeah.
I almost did.
You're just right.
But you were like the voice actor behind it. You're the animator behind it. You did all that. Why? I guess.
Why? That's a great question. Why? Why anything? So the genesis of that whole thing, that whole video, was I would attribute that to a guy named Eric Fensler, who you may know from the G.I. Joe PSAs. With it's like, I'm a computer, all that stuff. And this was 2005, right? So early days, basically pre-YouTube. And so saw the G.I. Joe PSAs and thought that is the funniest thing that I've ever seen. And also it was one of those moments where you kind of feel like God is shining a flashlight on you. And what I mean by that is, it's sort of like my medium. It's the animation content that I grew up with, all of these things. And it was so funny and executed so well. And it was sort of like, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with this information now that you've seen this? And it was just one of those things that kind of forced us to respond. Right. And so, we start kind of looking back through, or going through the 80s kid memory banks, and He-Man is a very, obvious choice. What we did was we bought a bunch of He-Man VHS tapes off of eBay and started looking through that footage. And if you look at the tween frames, especially, because these animators were on a tight timeline and not a lot of budget. They had Mattel had toys to sell,
right.
And so you look at this animation and it was just kind of like, this stuff is ridiculous. And the possibilities, just
the light bulb went off.
Right. I was in my car driving to work. And a lot of times my car is my
sanctuary.
My sanctuary. Yeah. My vocal
I know that feeling.
Yes, you do. I don't know if it came on the radio or what, but that Four Non-Blondes song, What's Up by Four Non-Blondes, came to mind on this particular day. And I was thinking that would be really funny to go to a karaoke bar and sing this with my friends and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the visual was not the original idea. It was just the sound.
No, I mean, the visual, it was we knew that it was going to be He-Man,
right?
But it was just what's the story? What is he doing? Are we going to do a Space Ghost Coast to Coast thing or a C-Lab thing? Is it going to be some kind of sketch thing? And the idea of a music video just to us seemed so much more. It seemed to be an elevated idea. It was just easier for me to connect the dots that way.
Yeah.
And so at that time, my friend Ryan worked at a post-production studio in Tulsa. And so our He-Man time was me driving up to Tulsa, and we would spend the weekend in, his edit suite, making this stuff. And so I made this instrumental track, but recorded the vocals for it in his edit suite. Most of it was first take, almost all of it was first take.
That's awesome.
And because like that's where the good stuff is. You know,
Right.
it's like you make a
You're
scratch
being
track.
more silly. You're being more fun. It's just open. It flows a little better. Yeah,
exactly. And it was just like, you know, like the way in which like parts of it sound unhinged and stuff like that. It's because it was. I was just like, I'm just gonna go for it, you know. And
no fear.
Yeah, and we thought it was so funny. And then you know, like immediately got to work on making Prince Adam, you know, lining up his mouth flaps to, and like the first time I'll never forget the first time we got the, you know, Adam to actually sing the words in sync.
I bet he's just like,
oh yeah. I mean, we were just paralyzed with laughter. Like, this is it, you know, like, cause that's the moment when you know it's going to work. It's like, okay, now we just have to finish it.
Right.
You know, we've got 3 seconds of animation. Only like 1,000 seconds to go. So, yeah, it was.
I will say, when I watched the video last night, it was a lot longer than I remember being. I didn't remember being the full song. So that's like a lot more work than I remember being in there.
And that's, yeah. And the version of it that went crazy viral was the shorter version that starts at the chorus. So yeah, there's a lot of effort that you never see. It's like this slow roll intro, you know.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I totally forgot my disclaimer. So as far as FrameOne, the point or the purpose is to explore the emotional journey you experienced through your creative years to get to where you are with Secret Powers today. So knowing the He-Man video was kind of like the kicking off point. Was that the beginning of Slack Circus, or is that like halfway through?
Technically, no. Slack Circus was the name of my blog in 2001.
Okay,
if you can believe that.
I do.
And I needed a name, and you know, it's funny. Like we were talking about ADHD earlier, or just now. We're all ADHD compadres in this podcast booth. And
shout out to you, Nick.
Nick, my man. So the name Slack Circus, I now understand, was me trying to make sense of the way that my brain works.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is feeling very lazy, but also lots of activity, like circus going on in here. I had this character that I invented in college called Circus Head, and like all of my college projects were called under the name Circus Head Productions. And Circus Head was like, that's how I feel. I feel like there's a lot going on up here, and I'm paralyzed, and I don't have the wherewithal to do any of it.
Yeah,
right,
100%.
And so that's where the name Slack Circus came from. I was working in Silicon Valley at the time when I had, you know, this blog, and it seemed like a good name. It's like it was a name that helped me to understand the way that I felt, and it also was kind of a name that I was sort of giving to the whole scene there.
Yeah,
you know, because it was like, this was like Silicon Valley, the series, you know, early days Silicon Valley, though, like, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. And so it was just like lots of people running around trying to make lots of money, and only about maybe half of the people knew what they were doing. So it was sort of like this frenzy of activity, but, you know, a lot of times people were like playing foosball and riding scooters around. So that's the Slack.
So it just kind of came together that way. So I'm curious. So this is going to be kind of a fun ADHD dive, I think. Personally, I now know that my ADHD is a big driving factor of my all or nothing mentality. Either I have to go 200% to the wall.
Wait a minute.
Or
what's the name of your company?
Hyper Focus.
Yeah, interesting.
Imagine that, right? It was not unintentional. We'll put it that way. So I'm curious. So you start playing the Slack Circus. Do you have a similar all or nothing drive?
Absolutely. Yes.
How did that play into starting the first company, Slack Circus?
Well, I mean, I would start it at the video itself. Yeah. You know, and I mean, I think that was something that Ryan and I shared, was just, we are going to, sorry, I bumped that. We are going to kill ourselves to get this done. I mean, and it was a lot of work, you know. I mean, Ryan was like hand rotoing Prince Adam off of the backgrounds, and
in 2001.
I think he was using flame to do it.
Yeah, Roto Brush was not a thing back then.
No, it was not. And Roto Brush would do a great job with that animation now. It's like nice, clean lines and everything. But it was a lot of work. And then doing all of the mouth flaps frame by frame. I mean, there was no other way to do it, you know. Maybe we tried to figure out an automated way to do it, but it was frame by frame. Final Cut Pro, we were like making 1 and 2 frame cuts, you know, and just lining up the animation that way. So it was sort of like, you know, that hyper focus, right? Of you see what the end goal is, and you're not going to stop until that's done. And, you know, putting everything else on hold, like the entire life and health and
everything,
you know, everything.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, absolutely. That was I now see more clearly that for what it was, which was kind of a hyper focus.
Absolutely. So Slack Circus takes off. At what point did you divert? Because I understand Slack Circus is still going. It's still a thing. Mm-hmm. At what point did Secret Power start?
I'll go back to kind of the early days of, so, you know, we had Slack Circus YouTube channel, made the He-Man video, and that was it. And the next decision that came forth was, do you want to do this maybe more, like for money, you know, for a living, you know?
So apparently the punishment of rotoing 3 minutes or 4 minutes of video was not enough to say, okay, I don't want to do that. You're like, I'm hooked. I'm in.
Oh no. Like I saw no issue with any of that. Like I've always been a big, fan of, spending absurd amounts of time on, you know, a ridiculous idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
What happened was, so at the time when the He-Man video was happening, I was working at this company, Club Corp. My title was multimedia specialist. So all the media was my domain. So I was their video guy. And so I would shoot, you know, interviews with, you know, the executive staff, and I would go to, you know, member events. They owned and operated country clubs. And so, you know, when I was at Club Corp, the He-Man video had been released.
Yeah.
And honestly, to not a lot of fanfare. I mean, there's people weren't on. I mean, it had passionate little audiences here and there, but we got an email there through a connection through Ryan and friends of friends. This game studio called Wide Load Games had seen the He-Man video and said, we think that's funny. We have this game that we're working on, and we're going to need a bunch of short, funny little pieces of animation. Would you be interested in, you know, bidding on this project?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was sort of one of those freak out moments. It was like, is this real? Like, is this my shot?
Because you didn't expect anything to come of it.
Not really. I mean, I expected to, you know,
get a couple likes.
If we're lucky, you know, put it on the internet and, you know, maybe it does something. But I was never, I was never thinking, oh, this is going to be the
defining moment of career.
My ticket to the top. No, it was not that at all. I mean, it was kind of like, get this call and you have this freak out moment, and it's sort of like, wait a minute, is this what Eminem was talking about? Like, is
this Mom Spaghetti?
Is this Mom Spaghetti? Is this the moment? You know, and we put everything we had into that proposal, and you know, I used every bit of RFP knowledge that I had from, you know, like at Club Corp, receiving RFPs from other like marketing agencies.
Kind of get that inside peek behind the curtain.
No, I mean, don't misunderstand. I straight up ripped off some of the way that some of these agencies had done RFPs. I'm like, I've got like 48 hours to put this together.
You had a framework, a template.
Yeah, exactly. It was a template. There was no Chat GPT.
So was this you and Ryan doing this together at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, so we turned in this RFP, and
how confident did you feel when you submitted that RFP?
I felt pretty confident. Like, we definitely over delivered.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, this is one of the best RFP responses we've ever received.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where it's like, you
were hungry.
I was definitely hungry and didn't really know what the bar was.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I'm going to swing for like that way up there. And it turns out that was like more than was needed, but I don't regret that at all. And, you know, it was the process of doing that RFP, like really digging into like, well, how much effort is this going to take? You know, how much money should we charge to do all of that? I had no idea about how to do any of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, phoned a few friends, stole a few of, you know, these other marketing agencies' best moves.
Yep.
And that was it. So we got that contract, and it was to do 10. No, it was a lot. I don't remember all of the numbers. It was 10 or 20. It was some number of these little fake commercials, like animated commercials featuring anthropomorphic animals.
Okay.
So it was like, imagine a CNN run by animals. That was sort of their story world.
Got it. Yep.
And so we did all these fake commercials starring these different animal characters. And so didn't exactly know how to do what needed to be done.
But we're going to figure it out along the way.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it was another one of those like kind of free fall moments. It's like, okay, we won the bid. We got it. Like we got the job.
Now what?
How are we going to do this? Right. And
so what was your first move to bring that together then? Was it like finding additional people for labor, for help? Was it just we're going to dive in and do it? Because this is like the birth of Secret Powers here.
Yeah, it is. And so Ryan knew After Effects very well, and was and is an excellent editor. And you know, like I felt like all I was bringing to the table was like some low level animation knowledge and some songwriting ability and some like maybe some comedy.
But that idea is critical though. Like doesn't matter how good you are technically if the idea is not there.
And so like in writing the commercials and figuring out something, like we had to figure out how are we going to execute this. Yeah. And so our first pass of this, maybe we can put I'll give you some of this animation you can use as B-roll.
I would love that. I'd love that.
If you're interested in that.
Yes, please.
This is it's still on Slack Circus, I think. And anyway,
we'll find it.
So what we ended up doing was, we did an animation test because we wanted to show them a proof of concept that this style could work, right? Yeah. And so we took one of their characters and we basically just like chopped the character into pieces and puppeted the thing.
Yeah.
And we did an animation test to a Muhammad Ali speech where he's like talking trash after Matt. He's like talking about like Sonny Liston or somebody like that. He's like, I told you I was the greatest of all time. You did, you know, all this stuff. And so we had this, what was the main, we did this character. Oh, it was a hippo.
Hippo. Okay.
Yeah, it was a hippo. And so he was just talking trash with Muhammad Ali's voice. So we did this in After Effects, and the first thing we learned, at least After Effects at this time, it was kind of like, this was kind of a pain.
I guess that's like CS3?
Somewhere around there. I don't even think they were calling it CS yet, man. I want to say it was like After Effects 8 or something like that. Got it. But they had, so it's like, all right, we got this, whatever it was, 8-second, 10-second animation test done. If they like it, then it's another stage of like, okay,
yeah.
How do we do it? And this was like pre-Duick and all of that. Like Duick would be a great way to do it probably now, but anyway, so what we ended up doing was, I know we're kind of getting in the animation weeds here.
That's fine. That's fine.
But necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so what we ended up doing was, my friend Nathan is an excellent animator or illustrator.
Yeah.
He's also a good animator, but he's a very good illustrator. And so my friend Nathan came on board to do all of the illustration work, like all of this character work. And so he gave us vectors of all of that. And then I taught myself how to use Anime Studio Pro. And it was actually a very ideal tool for this particular thing where you're taking 2D art, like vector art of characters, and it had like an IK system in it, and it actually did a great job of morphing the art.
Yeah.
And you could do like a switch group for your mouth flaps and blinks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it took a while to learn, but once we figured out that workflow, it was just
rinse and repeat and just get it done.
Yeah.
What I love about this is it seems like such a grassroots effort from like, you didn't set out to start a studio at that point. You just want to pitch and you're like, well, let's do this here.
Yeah.
And so your first dive into a project, you're already bringing people on, you're managing workflows and that kind of stuff without any intent of building what you have today.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, as you're growing Secret Powers, it's really important to have like clear boundaries of like, this is what you're being hired for. This is what we're doing. And just kind of talk to me about the level of communication you have to have with the people you're bringing on board.
Yeah. We essentially started, and I think a lot of people that do what we do start this way, right? You start as a freelancer because you're good at doing, the thing that you're good at doing. And, you sort of like operate with that mindset. And like, I'll just use the, that wide load job as an example, like you were just saying, is like, okay, great. Now we have this work. Now, how are we going to get it done?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you're just calling friends, right? So I was like calling my friend Chris to help with audio, and calling my friend Nathan for illustration. And it was like me and Ryan, like doing all of the video work. And so, a lot of times the great thing about friends is that you like each other and you understand each other, and you work well together and all of that. And I think it's really easy to start off in like, all right, well, like maybe it's a freelance collective, or maybe it's like it's a company, but really it's like we're a
all
collection
working together, we're friends, we're doing
exactly
side by side.
And I love that. It's like being in a band. Like the feeling of that is really cool. But as things start to grow, you start to see like the importance, to what you were saying, the importance of
communication and boundaries.
Precisely. Yeah. Setting, expectations like, okay, well, like, what's your job? What's my job? Like, when we get paid for stuff, like, what do you get paid? What do I get paid?
So let me ask you a question then. As far as, because the point of FrameOne is to help inspire the next generation of either freelancers or studio owners. Mm-hmm. People that are starting out, what would be your advice to them to say, hey, do X, Y, Z?
Like to start a studio?
Yeah, especially when you're working with friends or you're building that network from where Secret Powers came from. What would you tell future people?
Yeah, I think, in setting those expectations and in communicating clearly, part of doing both of those things is you need to have something on paper. And it sucks. Like if it's like, oh, this is me and my buddy. We're doing stuff. All right, like let's go get the lawyers, or let's get on LegalZoom and let's write this stuff up. That doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel like the natural thing to do, or it feels like
we're planning for our failure.
Exactly. Or it's like signing a prenup or something like that. It's
we're
like
gonna be best friends forever.
It's like, don't you trust me? It's like, well, don't you trust me? But it's really it's the same. It's for the same reason that you have clients or you have contracts with your clients, right? Because what does a contract do? It sets expectations on, we're going to deliver this and we're going to get paid this. And then client, your role in this is to, give feedback, and this is whatever the contract says, right?
Yeah.
That's really important, because in the heat of completing a project, or when, let's say, when I know that this has never happened with any of your projects, but often projects will go on longer than you originally thought. And so it's vital to have some kind of a document that tells you what to do.
Yeah.
Because humans will either want to get mad about something, or will want to acquiesce and be really nice. And it's like, oh, it's my bro. So
right.
And having something on paper kind of takes that part of it. It takes the emotion out of it.
It takes the ambiguity out of it.
Yes.
It makes it very clear, like, this is what's happening. Everyone's on the same page. There's no confusion. It's very clear,
Right.
black and white.
Yeah. And I think early on, and especially like when I was a freelancer, it just feels dirty or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I get that.
I get that. Or it feels like disingenuous or something like that. It was like, well, no, it's just this is something that it's just a tool that you use to so that you know what the correct answer is.
Yeah.
You know?
So my business partner and I, we started our studio in January this year.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things we set up by advice of everyone I'm talking to was our operating agreement. And you're right, it did feel dirty. I didn't love the idea of saying, hey, if you've got to kick me out or vice versa, like that just feels gross. We don't want to feel plan for success. But I kind of put a little positive spin on there going, someday when I sell this thing, what's that going to look like?
Yep.
Is this my retirement plan?
Right.
And having that mentality of, I'm not planning for failure, but I'm planning for succession, kind of just, I don't know, change the conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I will tell you that you're wise to do that right at the start. Like that's wise. And I would confess that is a can that I kicked down the road for a long time, just like whatever. It didn't feel good,
right.
to do it. And that's
I want to be creating things, damn it.
Exactly. It's like, I just like making stuff.
Right.
And, I think that having passion for what you're doing is a good thing. Like use that, harness that. But if you are committed to wanting to do this for a living, you're going to have to do some of those things.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is way worse. What it looked like for me, not having a lot of that stuff and not thinking about things from a business perspective is I got burnt out. Like I was
boundaries, work life.
Right. It's like work life boundaries and interpersonal boundaries and, working with friends and like all of those things can get complicated. I don't think they have to. I think that there's absolutely a way that you can do it. But like you said, communication is everything, and the moment that you feel like, I think there's a vibe here, like we need to press into that and see what might be going on there. Maybe it's nothing.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is something that we actually need to address and talk about. And, there are a lot of things throughout the, 16 years that I've been doing this where I didn't do that. Or I'm like, it'll be okay. Or, it's like, that was a little, I didn't like that, but I'll just kind of absorb that. And, it's like, being overly, people pleasing is a struggle that I have. And so, it is. It's not worth it though. Like the moment of discomfort to to
have the conversation, get it out there,
exactly.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Exactly. And again, if for a lot of this stuff, if you have it, if you have a contract of some sort, then it's like there's no emotion in that. It's just like, well, this is what it is. We agreed to it. So yeah.
Well, let's change the conversation a little bit then. So you started Secret Powers, basically having friends help out, freelance, contract labor, that kind of stuff. What was the financial side of that where you're like, I can afford to hire someone versus I just have to rely on hire someone for this job and then hire someone for this job? When could you make that switch to a full-time employee?
So the big transition there, it was really just like having enough repeat clients to where we could, afford that overhead.
Was there a certain number you're like, I'm going to hit this number here and then I'm going to do it? Or is it more by necessity?
No, not at all. When you do this for long enough, or let's say you're just freelancing and you're scaling a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, you at least have a couple of people that you're working with regularly. You start to realize I'm spending all of my time setting up meetings and creating estimates and sending invoices and
all these behind the scene things.
Like all of
you don't have time to be on the box anymore.
Right. Exactly. And so producers are going to save the world. I'm convinced. And they have saved my life multiple times. But that decision, I don't remember the year. I'm going to say it was 2013, 14, that kind of time frame. And we were working with a fairly large client, and we're getting tons of work. And I had reached, like, I was past the burnout point. Like, you
had nothing left in the tank.
I was done.
Yeah.
Right. And I was ready to, like, just, kind of hand the keys over to somebody that's like, just walk away from the whole thing. I submitted resumes to Lockheed Martin here in town. Like, can you imagine? Like, I'm going to a defense contractor. I don't know what but I was disillusioned, right? And was kind of ready to, like, all right, I'm just gonna ride off into the sunset, and it's gonna be like on another part of the horizon from where Secret Powers is, which seems like crazy to hear now, but I meant it. I mean, I was serious.
You were just done, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I just started talking to friends that know a lot more about business than I do, and just asking them for advice. And I'll never forget. I sat down with. So there's an agency here in town called Schaefer Ad Company.
Okay.
And their founder is Ken Schaefer. And I, through a friend of a friend, had set up coffee with Ken, because, like, I was, basically I was talking to friends and, like, just
trying to find somebody
my eyes out.
What do you do?
Like, what do you do? And my friend Charlie said, "Hey, you should talk to Ken. Yeah, I bet he'd have something to say about this." So I set up this coffee, and I don't know what he thought. I mean, I thought he probably thought I was interested in, I was trying to, like, sell him on, like, video services or something like that. But I just start, like, telling my story, and he was so awesome and so gracious about it. He just kind of rolled with it. He was like, "Oh, okay, so this, conversation is going somewhere I
can
didn't
be
expect,
helpful
but
here. You're not trying to sell me something."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But here's what I think, and I'll never forget it. This was like one of those pivotal moments. He said, the way I see it, you have three choices. You can keep doing what you're doing, ride hard, burn out. You can hope that someone else will pay you to do what you're doing now, and pay you the same that you're making now, and have the same cool projects that you have now. Or third option, you can change the way that you're doing things.
Right.
And, it's one of those things. It's like kind of rhetorical. It's like,
you know which one the right one is.
You're meant to. I mean, and for some people, option two, it could be, maybe going someplace else is.
I mean, that was the question I had going to Camp Mograph this year was, do I start a studio? Do I keep freelancing, or find someone else that I can work for instead? Yeah. So I get it. It's a hard question. It's
a very difficult question, because it gets at the core of what you're wired for.
Yeah.
Because, like, not everybody is wired to run a business, and that's okay.
You have to let go of the vine, to hand off the responsibilities of the people.
I do think it takes a lot of self-exploration to know what that right answer is for you.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
don't think
it's not the same for everybody.
It's not. And there's not a wrong answer, but it also, it is very easy to answer the question incorrectly, or to have not done the self-exploration
and just put an answer out there
and just say, well, like, or I'm just going to do this. And I mean, like, I think for the longest time was unwilling or scared or what, to just, like, go pro with Secret Powers.
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are that way, where they have to hang on to everything. They can't let go of anything, because this is your baby. You built this from scratch. And to say, hey, for you to even just send an invoice, that's What if you get it wrong? What something goes like that? That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to do. But I think you touched on a really interesting point that I want to kind of follow up here is finding a mentor or someone you can actually ask advice on. So talk to me about that. When you found yourself, your secret powers, a mentor, how did things change for you?
So, and I don't even know that it was one mentor. Like that conversation with Ken was one conversation.
Right.
It was more of like a cloud of mentors,
Right.
Where I was talking to some friends about financial stuff, and talking to some friends about business stuff. But one of the things that I did do is I got involved with an entrepreneurial organization, or it's called EO, and there's a chapter that met here in Fort Worth, and so you get into a group, and they purposely pair you with other business owners that are in different industries from you. So we had an accountant, we had a real estate entrepreneur, we had like all these different construction, everything. And so once a month we would meet, and it would be things like, all right, we're setting quarterly goals. How are you doing with those? So there was an accountability piece.
Yep.
And then there was also let's just share what's going on. Like, what are you struggling with? And I realized that this is one of the vital things that I was missing, was just community, community of people that are in the same boat as me. Because like when you are, running when you're running a business, and even if you like fell into it ass backwards like I did, you are like, it can be very isolating. You can feel like you're on an island, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And so those conversations that you have with those other people, it's like, it's so there's so much freedom in hearing, oh man, like I have no idea what I'm doing either, or like, yes, I was faced with this too, and I was really scared, and here's what happened. So, don't give up. Just like, do what you think you're supposed to do with the information that you have, and move forward. And so I think just inviting other people in was the real turning point in all of this, like sharing, like, this is what is actually going on with me. What would you do in this case? Or has this ever happened to you? Right. So got involved in EO. That was awesome. Like it was like transformative for sure.
Yeah.
And so like, that's what I mean by a cloud of mentors. I mean, it was just
have all these different touch points.
Yeah. And so it was like anybody, I could call, any of these people, or, send them an email or whatever, and say, here's what I'm dealing with. What do you think?
I think what I love about that is I'm noticing this common trend across all these interviews, that everyone that starts their studio, I mean, when they first start off, they're confident, but they don't know what they're doing. They're figuring out as they go. And yes, there's like different formulas or strategies or like org charts or how things can flow. You can put a blueprint together, but at the end of the day, you're just like, all right, I don't know how to do this. We're going to figure it out on the fly and just learn as we're going.
Yeah.
What I love about this is it just seems like the people that are, like Secret Powers, Cream, all like these top studios that I'm talking to, you figured it out. Like as you're going, there's not a roadmap that you just were inherently born with. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah. It's, I think maybe if you go to business school, there's kind of a roadmap, but I don't even know if that.
We're animators.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why would I go to business school? That's crazy.
So I do want to ask you a little bit about branding and marketing and finding your niche.
Yeah.
Because, being that you make advertising for video games is a very specific niche. You're not doing like investment banking and tech and everything else where it's just there's so much overflow. How has finding just that space where you're working in transformed Secret Powers?
Well, I think having that kind of focus, it does a lot of things. One, it gives you some clear guidance on what's a yes and what's a no.
Yeah.
Like what are we here for? It gives purpose to the way that you operate, and I think that it also gives you an opportunity to build some efficiencies in your just, standard operating procedure, right? Just like how you go about the business of, getting things done. and billing for them and having employees and having insurance and stuff like that. If you're everything to everybody, you're going to get burned out, one, and two, you're going to become there's a temptation to become kind of like a dumping ground for all of your clients' problems.
Yep.
Right.
No, I get that. So I'm curious, being that you found your focus, your niche, has there ever been a moment where being so specialized has been a hindrance or has caused problems?
Yeah. I mean, so we talk about this fairly often, actually, in that certain industries or certain verticals are very cyclical, right? And so that can lead to certain seasons becoming completely insane, when all of your clients are sort of orbiting around the same touch points. Like, in the case of video games, it's either, trade shows or, kind of the season for big releases and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. And then too, like, I do think it's good to diversify where it makes sense to do so. And what I mean by that is, like, so video games is probably 80% of what we do. The other 20% is broadcast packages and graphics packages and stuff like that. And then some animation, strictly animation based things. But the video games has become more or less our bread and butter. And so while we do spend most of our time doing that, we're always looking for projects where our point of view can really add something to it, where we're uniquely equipped to deliver something really unique and cool for the client.
I want to go back to the burnout thing for just kind of a second. Because one problem that I recently was facing was there was zero work-life balance or even with my business partner boundaries there either, where we were working until midnight every night. We had revision to revisions. We had it was a nightmare of 2 months to get started just because, we took on everything we could. And so there were no boundaries with clients. We're working until midnight. I got called away from my son's birthday party. A lot of bad stuff going on there.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Have you ever found a solution for that, for the people that are facing those problems?
Well, one solution is scale.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But that's a scary financial investment.
It's very scary. And that's why a lot of people don't do it. It's why I put it off for the better part of 10 years. Because you're like, oh, how am I can't afford that much overhead. But I'll have to, so I know, Joel Pilger. And, and so, he had a good way of putting this, like, the scariness of salaried employees. Like, it's like, oh, it's this huge investment, but it's sort of like when you look at, all right, if I had somebody who was permalance and you brought them on, I guarantee there are many studios that would say, yeah, we have certain kind of repeat freelancers or permalancers that we work with quite a lot on a monthly basis, sometimes for the better part of 6 months, maybe. And so it's sort of like, guess what? You're already like, you're paying a salary, like you can't afford it. I think it's scary though, because, when you're, in a project-based business, well, you're bringing those freelancers on to that
one project.
Right. So you've got this project and that has a budget and that's how you're affording to pay that person. And so then you think, like, well, what about all those other times? Like, what about the times?
There's a bigger conversation about even just tracking your leads and your inquiries then that helps project and forecast. Is that kind of a thing?
Well, like sales. Yeah, of course. Like sales is a big part of that. It's like, okay, like breaking that feast or famine cycle where it's like you're busy slammed doing this one project and then you can't think about anything else. And therefore you can't sell.
You can't do the marketing, can't do the selling.
You can't line up the next thing. And it's like, there's so many factors. It's like, there's no way to make it sound simple. Like I wish that there was, but,
it's a chicken and egg problem basically.
It is, but it's like, I remember this was one of the things that Joel had said in that workshop, though, about this exact problem, is that you can't, like, let's say, my primary responsibility these days is sales, or at least it should be most of the time.
Yeah.
And so, it wouldn't even be possible for me to spend time doing that if I didn't have,
operations,
a team,
finance,
right? Like the operations is handled and the billing is handled, and the work is getting done, and all of that. Like that's the. I don't know how you do that without a team of people. It's very difficult. I mean, I think you can, but it's sort of like, if you're a freelancer, or if you're, let's say, like, I want to be a company of 2 forever. I think that's fine, but you really have to put some rails on that,
Start outsourcing finance to other freelancers, or your bookkeeper, or those kind of things.
Or just like,
you can't do it all.
You can't do it all. Or you're just, you're saying no to the right projects, and you are charging correctly for the projects that you do take on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the only way to do it. But for me, I think that gets really stressful really quickly. And there's always that feeling of discomfort when, you're sort of like pushing to that next, like you're taking on that project that's like a little bit bigger than you usually do. It's a little more uncomfortable, and you start to feel that tension of like being under-resourced, say, or, like feeling like, I feel like I'm back in that, like, spinning all of the plates kind of mode again.
Yeah.
And so that can be an indication, all right, it might be time to scale a little bit, which, again, it's scary every single time, but it's less scary. Like, it's significantly less scary once. I mean, I've never laid anybody off for financial reasons. Like, the one thing that I was always, the most
worried about,
afraid of,
has never been an issue.
Has never happened. And so,
leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that you never account for is, like, having that person on staff. They're part of the mission now. Like, that's what you're doing with the downtime.
I imagine that goes back into finding your company's core values, core focus, core everything else, to make sure that you're hiring people to help push the ship forward.
Oh, yes. You have to, because, like, those are the people that you want on your team, right?
Yeah.
There's the people that can, help you advance whatever your purpose is.
Awesome. Well, Jay, that is our time. But thank you so much for being on today. It is good to see you.
The best, man.
My ADHD friend, Cat Mograph, all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And your anniversary is on my birthday.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. We're like bonded in animation.
Mm-hmm. Bonded in animation forever.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Drysen. Appreciate it, man.